Hello everyone, it's Banshee King here doing a follow-up video to my last WoW video that was just showing off my main here. What I'm going to be doing is attempting to give a little bit of a guide around how I play Marksman, and just to make everyone aware, there's probably 1,000,001 better ways to play the spec, but this is the way that I play it. I quite enjoy it. It's a very burst focused build, and what I'll be doing is I'll be running through the talents that I go with, I'll be running through the rotation, I'll be running through stat prioritization, and I'll also give you an idea of my gear and probably the more key parts of my gear that go well with the spec. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So these are my talents. I'm going to go through the ones that I've chosen. I'm not going to really touch on the ones that I haven't chosen too much, but these are the ones that I like to go with. So Lone Wolf is quite standard, I think, with Marksman. It just gives you a massive 18% overall increase to your damage, which is really good. Second tree, I've got the Soul of the Huntsmaster legendary ring, which allows me to have lock and load anyway, but I would say if you don't have this ring, probably still just go with lock and load. I like to use the ring because I feel that true aim is really quite nice for longer fights. It increases your damage on a single target enemy. The more you kind of send aim shots and arcane shots at it, stacks up to 10 times and increases your damage against that target by 2% for each time, so 20% damage increase, it can make a lot of difference on those longer fights. But like I said, if you don't have the ring, I'd probably still go with lock and load, as having those lock and load procs are really quite good. Third tree, I'll go with post haste. Just gives you a nice little movement buff to every time you do disengage. Next tree, I go with patient sniper. Now with this tree, I think I wouldn't really ever go for sentinel, but if you're doing if you're the sort of person who does a lot of Mythic Plus dungeons, or there's a really AoE heavy raid fight, then Explosive Shot is quite good for that as well. But generally I tend to only really stick with Patient Sniper, as a lot of Marksman damage is all really aim shot focus, and Patient Sniper just increases your aim shot damage, so it's overall quite good. Next I go with Binding Shot. I just feel that it's just a bit more useful than the other ones really. It's good for PvP, it's good for in dungeons, and yeah, I think Camouflage I used to use when I was leveling, when I needed just a little bit more extra health, but it's not really too relevant when you're max level. The next tree is quite interesting, so I tend to really stick with Murder of Crows because I really like single target DPS. Barrage is alright for AoE, but the trouble with Barrage is that you should be prepared to pull pretty much everything that is in the dungeon, because it's got such a massive range that even if you think that you're really far back, if you use it, you still might end up pulling the odd stray mob here or there. Volley is also quite nice, as it's just a nice little passive that you can have and does some extra AoE. But I probably should switch to Volley if I'm doing a lot of Mythic Plus stuff, but I just like Murder of Crows because I like having that extra single target DPS on the boss fights. And the final tree, I go with Trick Shot, mainly because again it's adding that extra damage to your aim shot, or if you've got other targets that have been made vulnerable by your mark shot, then it will allow you to do a little bit more AoE, which can compensate for not having volley or barrage or potentially even explosive shot. Some people like to go with sidewinders. Now, I've experimented a little bit with sidewinders, and I think it just takes a different type of playstyle to what I like. You might potentially be able to get a bit more damage output by using sidewinders, depending on other bits of your gear. But personally, I don't really like to use sidewinders because I like to have a bit more control over my mark shots and when I'm able to make mobs vulnerable. I also really like popping true shot and sending a lot of multi-shots and then mark shots while that's active, because for marksmen that's probably one of the best ways, if not the best way, to do AoE damage. It's just really overpowered. So that's why I tend to stray away from sidewinders. And some people use piercing shot as well, and I think that's quite a nice attack. It does a really good amount of damage, but again, I think a lot of your damage is either going to be coming from mark shot, from those AoE circumstances, or just from aim shot. So I tend to kind of avoid that as well and try and focus on anything that's going to increase aim shot, or anything that's going to help me get more mark shots out there as well. So that's the talents that I kind of roll with. Next we'll have a little look at the gear. So a bit of stat prioritization. I try and go with as much mastery as possible. So I've got quite a bit of mastery already there. And my next sort of stat that I would want to try and focus on would probably be crit, because your crits are quite important as well. Then it will probably be haste, and then versatility. But of course agility would be your main thing to focus on. Most things come with agility though. To go into a bit more of the finite details of my gear, I've got the 4-piece from the new tier, which is quite good. The first set piece bonus from that basically increases how much focus you're getting back from your focus building abilities, such as arcane shot and multi-shot, but it also increases the damage that those particular abilities do. If you roll with sidewinders, it would do the same for that, as that's a focus regenerating ability, and it would also increase the damage of that as well. So that's the first set bonus. The second one, and probably the one that you would be more excited about, would be the fact that mark shot has a 50% chance to fire up to 3 additional targets hit by mark shot an additional time. So essentially that means that if I maybe try and show you this dummy here, okay, couldn't really tell if did it so there we go. So in that little shot there, it fired it twice instead of just the once, and it does it up to 3 targets. So for those AoE fights, it really does just add quite a bit of extra damage to single target and AoE. Really, it's a lovely little extra buff, and yeah, it's really good. So it's made quite a difference to my DPS. Of course, legendary. So I think with marksman, you're gonna get the best damage when your cooldown true shot is open. So I quite enjoy the builds and the way of trying to reduce true shot's cooldown as much as possible. And the boots for marksman is, I'd say still that they're the best in slot, really. Legendary. The ring isn't really. I mean, some debate that it's not, but I personally prefer the ring because I like having that locked and loaded and true aim to kind of go with, so that's just my personal preference. You might find another legendary more suitable for the way that you play. But yeah, I'd say that these boots are quite important, because with these boots, along with Convergence of Fates, it really helps with reducing that cooldown on True Shot. And I can go, in some fights I can probably pop True Shot 5 or 6 times in a single fight, and each time I do, it just bumps my damage right up. So as much as I don't like having a trinket that's quite low eye level like that, the bonus effect from Convergence of Fates, it really does pay off overall. But later on I might experiment a little bit and see if I can replace Convergence of Fates, because a lot of people seem to think that it is a bit overrated, and it's not nice having a low eye level trinket really. But yeah, I think also something else to touch upon with my gear is the certain relics that I've got as well. So I try my best to have a relic that reduces the cooldown of True Shot. A lot of relics do have that, so I've got a blood relic in there, but I've got one in here that reduces the cooldown, see, and I'm planning on potentially replacing it with that, but I've got to play around with my relics still. But that's an idea of the gear. I mean, you can have lots of different pieces of gear that don't resemble mine and still dish out some nice DPS. This is just what I personally am comfortable with. So what I'll do now is just run through my rotation, and I'm going to do this solely based on a single target fight. I'm not going to be really covering AoE as much, although I suppose I could give you an idea of the AoE still. But what I do is I will first of all jump in with Murder of Crows. I will then pop any trinket cooldowns that I've got while the global cooldown is going, and then what I would do is fire a wind burst, but as soon as that's fired I would also pop True Shot. So I would try and pop True Shot as it's firing, as close as possible so that wind burst gets the benefit from it. I then send out my 3 aim shots, because with marksman you ideally want to try and get 3 aim shots every time that you apply vulnerable to the target. Something important about that is that I believe it's good to have at least over, I think it's 7% haste. I think I'd try and strive a little bit more towards 9 and above. But yeah, as long as you've got 9% or above haste, you should easily be able to fit in 3 aim shots. And if you're locked to low procs, then you're going to be doing potentially 4 aim shots each time you've applied vulnerable to a target. So if I give you an idea, oh, and sorry, yeah, of course you do your pre-pot as well. But essentially that's my rotation, and then I'll just kind of rinse and repeat by applying vulnerable and then trying to get my 3 aim shots in. So I'll give you an idea. So you do your pre-pot, do your Murder of Crows, trinket, wind burst, True Shot, 3 aim shots, get your focus back up, apply vulnerable again, aim shot, and you just repeat it like that. And if you're lucky, you can get those locked and loaded procs. It's good to keep an eye on vulnerable as well. If you see it just about to come off, then stop what you're doing, get your arcane shots out there, get your focus up, and then just reapply it. And you can just keep going like that. Eventually, if you've got similar gear to what I've got, and you're reducing the cooldown of True Shot, as you can see, it's almost ready to use again. Before I do it, I just use Murder of Crows again, because that's off cooldown, then Wind Burst, and then I've used it again. Okay, so just a couple of things to kind of highlight with that as well. When you use True Shot, you ideally want to get at least a minimum of 6 aim shots before it comes off, and you want to do it while Vulnerable is active still, so you're going to need to reapply Vulnerable once you've done your first 3. But then once you do reapply it, you can then just get those extra 3 in quite easily. And as long as you're doing that, you're going to still be getting some good single target DPS. Now, like I said, there's probably a few different ways that you could be playing Marksman at the moment. Like I said, a lot of people prefer Sidewinders over Trick Shot or Piercing Shot, and that can change the way that you play Marksman quite a bit. But this is my personal way of just playing Marksman, that I quite enjoy it. I've experimented with a few different builds and a few other legendaries and things like that, but I'm just not as comfortable with them as I am with this, and I still do fairly decent single target DPS with this build, with my gear. What I'll do as well is I'll quickly show my AoE. I believe there's an AoE dummy around here. Yeah. Okay. So, when it comes to AoE, if I'm in a raid or a dungeon and there's a nice big group of mobs, I'll start off by sending in a Wind Burst, because your Wind Burst has there's a talent somewhere in your little tree. There you go. It leaves behind a trail, and it also does a little bit of damage to any targets in that trail. So I'll start off by sending in a Wind Burst, but then as soon as I've done that, I'll just straight away pop my cooldowns, my Trinket and my True Shot, and then it's literally just multi-shot and mark shot, multi-shot, mark shot. And occasionally, if you get a locked and loaded proc, it's okay to send in a few of those if you've got Trick Shot. If you don't use Trick Shot though, when you use Piercing Shot, then it's probably best to still go with that rotation. Although Piercing Shot, I think that does still do some AoE, as long as the target's kind of in a line. But yeah, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. So I'll do my pop. Literally just that. Send some of those out. So it does do quite a good bit of damage there. But that's essentially the nitty-gritty of the way that I play Marksman. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you've got any questions, feel free to comment, and have a great day.